Malabar, Mysore, and A Tale of Two Sultans. Our 167th episode today with the most invincible, incorrigible author, Pushpa Karu. She's come out with this most, as she says, it's her magnum opus. So we get to hear from her today, and she was recently on a podcast with her most enlightening book on Thayams, which was quite recently, I would say, but I loved the book then, and I have loved this book again. So, welcome, Pushpa, once again on a platform. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah. Lovely to see you today. Coming to the book straight away and diving into the book straight away, you had mentioned that you had heard of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan before you started school from your grandmother. So tell us about your passion for this most historical father-son pair and the historical narrative behind this book.
Well, as I told you, I heard about these two guys from my grandmother before I started school. I belong to Malabar. I was born in Kannur, and it was one of the places where the Mysore Sultans had invaded. So I think in all the warrior clans in the district, it's even today, like now it's 250 years since the first invasion. So people keep talking about it in whispers. It's not openly discussed, and the trauma is kept alive. So from my grandmother never went to school; she was illiterate, but still she knew their story and she passed it on to me. So and later when I talked to a lot of other people, I found that in their families as well, the story is coming down. So a lot of destruction happened, and you know the our people's methods were very primitive of fighting, and the Mysore sultans used the European techniques, the cannons, the guns, the cavalry. So it was a very unequal fight, and our people got the worst of it. So that's why their names are known to everybody, not from the history books but separately. So in the book also I've brought some oral histories from a few people. Not everybody wanted their names to be mentioned, so I've mentioned only a handful of people there,
Eh,
but that is it.
But coming to the main character of the book, I mean, everyone is so fascinated with Tipu Sultan always, and he's so highly controversial. So, does your book add fuel to the fire? I would say.
I think there's enough fire. I didn't need to add fuel.
Mhm.
But then, I tried my best to bring out the facts. Much has been written about these two guys. Some of them early, even before Hyder Ali seized control of the Mysore kingdom from the warriors, there were Europeans who fought with him in his armies. And they have even written their memoirs. So there is a lot of written material by the British, the French, the Portuguese, the Dutch, in Persian authors also, because they had, Persian was very important in those days, especially in the Muslim kingdoms. And then the whole lot of South Indian languages, because all the southern states were invaded by these two guys at some time or other. So actually sifting through all the historical evidence was extremely difficult, and naturally there are contrasting views. So to figure out what exactly happened, the truth of all these events, it was a tough task, especially for me because I'm not a historian.
Mhm.
Only the basic facts I learned about them from school, because you have to write your exams. I hated history when I was in school. So I just knew only the bare facts, but then over the years I learned a lot. I was kind of self-taught. So I think I've done a fairly decent job, and I've tried to be as objective as possible. I mean, despite the fact that my perspective is that of a true Malbari, I cannot deny that.
You've been a history buff, and though you hated history in school, but the kind of books that you've brought out, I mean, it seems now that you've converted into a history lover and you are an independent researcher. So, I mean, it will be very interesting to know what was your research process. I mean, you couldn't have done the conventional way because, as you said, you're not typically, basically a history person, but now converted into one. So, how was your research process? I think that would be very, very interesting to know.
The serious part of the work I started during COVID.
Okay.
So initially it was downloading all the things that are available online, then buying all the books, reading everything, noting the facts. I couldn't travel much at that time. And then after that, when a little bit of the shadow of COVID I felt was lifting, I started going to all the places that were mentioned by the Sultan. So especially in Kerala, from right from the north, Kasargod to down south, I've come to all the places that they have mentioned. All the temples that they had destroyed, I've visited. Some places, they just tell you orally that this is he attacked here, he did this. And there were a whole lot of churches in the central part of Kerala, and Thrissur, Ernakulam districts. There were a lot of Christian churches also that they attacked and destroyed. Many of them, they bear plaques saying that, in this year, mostly it is 1789. 1789, Tipu Sultan attacked and this church was destroyed, and then it was rebuilt in this year, like that. So I physically went and saw all that and spoke to the people in all these places. Then I talked to people, whoever would share the oral histories of the families, I talked to them. And then in Mysore, I went to Srirangpatna, Mysore, all these places. Vellore was a place where Tipu Sultan's family, after his death, was confined there. And then there was a revolt in 1806, which the British suspected could have been instigated by his children. So there also, Vellore Fort and all that, I went and I found out many things, the graves of many people. For instance, the daughter of Purnaya, who was the Diwan of Mysore, her grave was also there. Her name is not mentioned. They say Purnaya's daughter, she converted to Islam and she died here. So those are some mysterious things, why would she have to convert to Islam? Did she marry somebody in the Sultan's family? Was it compulsion? All those questions come up.
So right. And there are recently I've seen the book by Vikram Sampath on Tipu Sultan, Weber Purandare also wrote. So what do you think? I mean, do you, do you meet the authors and also discuss your respective books? How does it happen? Because I think it's
No,
a bit,
I haven't.
okay.
No, I haven't met any of them, any of the authors who wrote about them.
Yeah.
I didn't have the pleasure. I don't know them really. But I read Vikram Sampath's book as soon as it came out. I'd read an earlier book of his also, Splendors of Mysore. There also had got a little bit of an idea. But of course, Vikram Sampath's latest book, it came at more or less the same time. It's just a few weeks before mine, so I couldn't really reference it. But there are a lot of parallel areas. I find that, we mentioned the same things. His book is twice as big as mine, has a lot more details.
I know, around
In fact,
1100 pages.
It's written 1,000 pages. I struggle to keep it down to 500 pages because I realize, it can be boring for the reader, especially if you're not interested in history, but you want to know. So I try to keep it simple, and the book will have the benefits as well as the minus points of shortening the things. For instance, one thing, their main occupation was war. So there are 4 Anglo-Mysore wars, and there are a whole lot of battles with the Marathas. Now, to do justice as a historian, you can't just leave out the wars just because you don't like war. You had to write it. So making it concise and what to leave out and all that, it was a struggle. And I've also mentioned what the Europeans have written about them, what Indian authors, more recent ones. In fact, there was a sort of a whitewashing effect over the years. The British kind of made him into a huge monster kind of thing. A lot of things they wrote about him with a lot of exaggerations and everything, because they wanted to show that their achievement in defeating and killing him was something great. Possibly that was the motive. But later authors, some people just idolized him. They felt he was a great fighter. He fought against the British, and so that glorification was there, and it is still going on.
Yeah, so right.
Even today, there are many people who feel that he's a great freedom fighter and all that.
Yeah, there was somebody wanting Tipu Jayanti out of his, I think. Yeah, all that was happening, definitely, you're right. Yeah.
We have hundreds and hundreds of freedom fighters. If we need to celebrate any Jayantis, there are any number of people. You will get more than 365 people for the 365 days or whatever. And I don't think we should celebrate Tipu Sultan, no. In fact, he was allied with the French. Hyder Ali also, his father also. In fact, Hyder Ali learned all his fighting tactics. He copied the European methods. he would poach the European generals and people from other kingdoms by paying more, and he would make them train his private army. So that's how he started out. Even before he got control of Mysore, he used that technique, and it was a very successful technique. He was a very good military strategist. In fact, it was Hyder Ali um, who conquered all the territories.
Yes.
He grabbed Mysore first, which was his own kingdom. He was actually commander for the Maharaja. He suppressed the Maharaja. He never declared himself king, but he was de facto ruler.
Hmm.
And then he conquered Bidanur. That was the next. It was in 1761 that he captures Mysore. 1763 he captures Bidanur, the Ikkeri kingdoms, which is in the north of Kerala. Dakshin Kannada, that area, Mangalore. Then only he attacks Malabar.
Yeah.
And finally, Coorg, he swallows a lot of places. It was he actually who captured them. Many other territories in Andhra also, like Gurram Konda, Adoni and all. But actually those places I couldn't go. I had my limitations. So some places I just left out. I wish I had, but I just couldn't. So, and Tamil Nadu, many places like Coimbatore and all that were constantly under them. The only place Hyder Ali failed to capture was Trichy.
Hmm.
Okay. Trichinapalli was now Tiruchirappalli. It was not, did not come under them, but they had many areas. So all the areas suffered. But when Tipu came to power, he actually lost all the territories one by one.
Hmm. Very right.
So his history of victory is also not as powerful as that of his father. I mean, he was a bit of a fanatic and, erratic in his decision making. He had many idiosyncrasies.
So
So
right.
that was how he was.
But having said that, we find accomplishments or whatever you can say, the works of Hyder Ali more than Tipu Sultan. But Tipu Sultan ultimately was more in the limelight, was well known, even if he was just there, if you see, very, very short period of time. So what do you have to say to that after your findings? That why is he still, I won't say called an icon because not in a very, very good manner, but still, what would you have to, what are your views on that point?
See, there are strange ways in which history is written. It's very hard to say why people did not glorify Hyder Ali but glorified only Tipu Sultan. Except what I can think is the cause of death. Hyder Ali died of cancer in the midst of the second Anglo-Mysore War.
Yeah.
He died quietly without a show. And Tipu Sultan, supposedly died in battle. It's hard to say even that because he was inside his fort. The fort was surrounded and stormed by the British. There was no way he could escape. Even today, like if you go there in Srirangpatna, the people will, local people, auto drivers like that whom you talk, they will tell you that if it had not been for the betrayal of his, right hand man, Mir Sadiq, they'll say Purnaya, these two all, they say they are betrayers, they betrayed him, and that is why he lost. But that's, it's quite illogical. Even if nobody had betrayed him, he would still have lost because he was completely outnumbered, surrendered, and the British had breached the fort and they were determined to take him out. So there was no way he could have won. Tactically, I think, he was not that clever as his father.
And he's often considered as someone who really fought colonialism, as we know that. So do you think is it right to call him a freedom fighter?
No way. See, first of all, in those days, India as a whole, it was not. He would refer to the rest of India as Hindustan. Okay, so he wasn't Hindustani. That concept was, I wouldn't blame him. That was the way the structure of the country was at that time. There were a lot of, it happened after the death of Aurangzeb. All the kingdoms split into so many little parts. And Tipu was where actually just he insulted the emperor. I mean, there are long stories behind that. He minted his own coins and he sent the coins as a gift to the Mughal emperor. I mean, who was naturally very pissed off. Anyway, these are all there are a lot of interesting side stories like this in the book. But another thing I want to mention is, I mean, a reason why we would not see Tipu as a hero? See, in the Third Anglo-Mysore War, he was badly defeated. Lord Cornwallis had surrounded again Srirangapatna, and if they wanted to finish him off, they could have finished him even then. And he agreed. He did not die fighting at that time. He agreed for very humiliating peace terms. He surrendered 2 of his sons to Cornwallis as hostages. Okay, to guarantee the payment of the tribute. He could pay only half. It was fixed at 3.3 crores.
My
He
God.
paid half, and the other half he surrendered his sons as a guarantee. I mean, which tiger and all will do that? I mean, this doesn't look very tigerish to me. Okay, and half his territories at that time in 1792, Malabar also went to the British. So the British got Malabar even before the death of Tipu. 7 years before his death, Malabar had already changed hands. And some other places like Salem and all that. He had to surrender all this. So that is not the, he's a brave man. He died fighting and all. You can't say if you take this history into account.
You're so right. Apart from the main protagonists, apart from Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, you've really mentioned a lot of unsung heroes, though you've not mentioned all the names, but still you've mentioned. So some of them that you would like to talk about, which have been mentioned in your book, and which are which people should know about.
Well, I would like to first mention Velu Nachiyar. Being a woman, she's a favorite with me.
Yeah.
She was actually the queen of Shivaganga, and her husband was killed in battle, and she had to escape. Now, at that time, the British and the Nawab of Arcot, they were, Nawab of Arcot was a sort of a chamcha of the British. So it is this tie-up that killed and defeated her husband, and she had to escape, along with the Maradu brothers who were her chieftains and, a lot of other people. She goes to a place near Madurai where Hyder Ali was camping.
Okay.
It was one of his fortresses where he would keep his weapons and train his army and all that. So he gave her shelter. Okay, they say that he was very impressed with her. She could speak Urdu and all that, and it impressed him. So he kind of adopted her as a sort of a sister, and he was good to her, which is for his nature, he wasn't very nice to anybody. He was very cold-blooded and calculating. But in her case, he had a soft corner. He kept her. Of course, literally, she was under a local Palekar, but under the overall eye of Hyder Ali. For 8 years, she was there training her people. She trained up a women's army. Okay, and in 1780, she, along with the women, on Vijayadashmi Day, the women get into the fort with carrying baskets of flowers.
Oh my God.
With their weapons and whatever hidden here and there and inside that, as if they are coming to worship. And all of a sudden, she manages to take over the fort. So her commander, again woman commander, Kuili by name, she, these oil lamps are there. There'll be ghee and all that. So she pours that on herself, sets herself on fire, and goes and explodes the ammunition depot of the British. So that is the turnaround that helps the other women to capture the fort. And the British or anybody could not recapture it for another 8 years. Velu Nachiyar rules over there. And after her death, her daughter takes over. So she was a queen who defeated the British and recaptured her place. And then outside Tamil Nadu, nobody knows her. Even in Tamil Nadu, I think only in recent years, people have begun to realize that there was such a woman. Okay, so there are lots of characters like this, Veerapanda Kattabomman, Velu Thambi Dalava. There were a lot of people like this who were contemporaries of Tipu Sultan and who also said that we have to drive the British out of India. And then another character whom I have mentioned here is Velluva Kammaran Nambiar.
Yes.
Who was converted by Hyder Ali. He became Ayaz Khan. He was a favorite of, the British call him Hayat Sahib. Okay, in their typically distorted fashion. Now, this boy, he grew up in the palace. He was a favorite of Hyder. And there were strong rumors that Hyder might declare him as a successor. And he put him in first in charge of Chitradurga fort. Later, he was a governor of Bidanur. Okay, when Hyder Ali dies, the British will quickly come and capture this place. Not capture, when they come there, um, Tipu was very jealous of Ayaz Khan from day one.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So he knew once Tipu becomes the ruler, he is in difficulty. Tipu actually sends a letter to the a secret letter to the second in command, saying that as soon as you get my letter, you finish off this Ayaz Khan and you take charge. But Ayaz Khan, true to this Hyder Ali's style of espionage was very pakka. So Tipu was also very good at it. Ayaz Khan was also very good. So Ayaz Khan gets the communication. I think he makes that guy only read it out openly in public, something like that. Then he kills that guy. All were equally cruel, okay? They were all trained by the same guy. So he kills this guy and then he realizes there's no escape for him. He sends a British prisoner to General Matthews, who was commanding that army, saying that he would like to surrender. So the British get Bidanur on a platter. There was a lot of wealth. It was one of the places which, Hyder called it Hyder Nagar after he captured it. He considered it his private kingdom. And he stored a lot of wealth over there. 13 million pounds sterling was taken over by the British. Ayaz Khan was sent off to exile in Mumbai. So, like this, there are a lot of side stories of very interesting people who are linked to the sultans in different ways.
That is what really makes this book interesting. It's not only about Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. There's so many more, and I'm sure you will write another book about these unsung heroes and unknown historical people. But coming back to Ayaz Khan, I mean, one question which really comes to mind, was it a forced conversion or was it a willing conversion? He was fine with it, that he
He
was getting
was
to
captured when he was a minor.
Okay.
So, conversion, religious conversion of a minor, what will we call it? Is it a forced conversion or a voluntary one?
Yeah.
Obviously, he had no choice. And there's a long history. Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan have done a whole lot of forced conversions and forced migrations. See, people from Mangalore, they were all driven to Sri Lanka like cattle. Okay, that was, yeah. And from Malabar also, a lot of people were driven to Sri Lanka. It's said that of the 15,000 people who were moved, only 200 people survived. So these are all also, part of their. Then they made some people to settle in Coorg. Coorg people were taken to Srirangpatna. So it was a form of punishment.
Yeah, I understand. Totally. But how does your book, I mean, Malabar Mysore and A Tale of Two Sultans, portray the contrasting leadership styles of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, and how did it really impact their styles of leadership, impact the region by far? How do you think, and how have you portrayed that in the book?
One thing they had in common was, I think both of them were very brave when it came to fighting. Battle, war, that was their core competency. But when it came to military strategy, cruelty, both were cruel, but Tipu was more cruel than his father.
No doubt.
And there are some people who have written that maybe Tipu was a little abnormal. They were doubting his sanity. That kind of remarks also there. It's difficult to say. But then he was erratic. See, when people are in power and everybody listens to them, they can afford to be whimsical, erratic, and different from day one to day two, but then Hyder was very consistent in his planning, in his execution. He knew when to fight, when to surrender, when to beg for mercy, like that. But Tipu was a bit more egoistic. He would not, he won't like to beg for mercy. But so finally, he'll be driven to a corner. That did not happen in the case of Hyder. He was quite victorious against the British. And one thing I have to mention is that, see, the Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan and the British, they were coming up in southern India at the same time. Soon after Robert Clive's victory at the Battle of Plassey, all this was happening in more or less the same time. Okay, so in a way, Hyder Ali had a bigger struggle to come to power, and he was always successful. Tipu actually, in a way, had it on a platter. Of course, earlier he fought most of the battles under his father. His dad's supervision was there all the time, and he had another brother, Karim. Karim was also trained by Hyder Ali to fight the battles. Similarly, Ayaz Khan was also, they would all be located in different places and have their own portfolios like that. And they would be these elder statesmen, not statesmen, commanders. Who were mostly the relatives of Hyder Ali. He would keep all his brother-in-law, this person, that person, like that. In fact, his brother-in-law Magdum Ali was the first person to invade Kerala.
Oh my
It
God.
was in 1768 at the invitation of the Palghat Raja. The Palghat Raja of the Tarur Swarupa. Okay, he invites Hyder Ali to come and deal with the Zamorin, who was, in Malayalam we call Samudri, but Zamorin is a better known. Zamorins of Calicut were ruling for hundreds of years. And the Zamorin was naturally more powerful and he was a little bit suppressing the Palghat Raja. So Palghat Raja calls Hyder Ali, come and help me. Hyder Ali had some crisis in Srirangpatna, he had to rush there. So he sends his brother-in-law, Magdum Ali. Okay, Magdum Ali comes with a huge army. So in those days, the basic strategy is you come and you exhibit your army, you surround some place, and then you call upon the other guy to surrender. So that guy either surrenders or he gives some money, and then this army will go away. So there will not really be a fight. Most of the time, if the deal doesn't work, that's when they fight. Okay, when they fight, it's very brutal. So here the Samudri just surrendered. He said he will give 12 lakh rupees. He gave some advance. And this Magdum Ali and team went away. So that was the first invasion of Kerala by a Muslim army. None of the others, the Mughals, the Malik Kafur, nobody has actually invaded Kerala. Even in the 3rd century BC, Emperor Ashoka, he mentions the Kerala Putras as people outside his domain. The Cholas, Pandyas, Sri Lanka, Kerala. So it was always more or less independent. In fact, real domination, I think, has happened only by the Cholas. Cholas occasionally occupied Rajaraja Chola at that time.
Fantastic. You've taken it on yourself to unravel the southern history, which most of us really are not really aware in such a way. And you call this book your magnum opus. Why? I mean,
Well,
I'm expecting even more.
Book. And nowadays, the reading habit is also wearing off. So even this, I was wondering, am I mad to write such a big book? Who's going to read it? So I think it's an era of writing smaller books. And also this is a lot of hard work.
I'm sure.
A lot of, I had to keep everything apart and then just work on this. So it was kind of tough. So I don't really have the motivation to write a bigger book.
But while writing this book and while going into so much of detail, and since COVID, as you mentioned, that you've been writing more or less, I've been on this book. I mean, do you think a book like this, I'm sure this is going to be a book which is going to be referred for any kind of case history on Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. But coming to these sultans back again, I can't resist talking about them. But what do you think was their personal motivation? What happens to people like them? The kind of personal or political motivations that really pushes them through. You're the best person I can talk to because you've really, really done quite a bit of research on their psyche as well. I'm sure you got into their character maybe one day while writing the book and maybe questioned yourself as to what can be the personal motivation of such highly strung individuals, I would say. Highly motivated.
Well, war
I can't
is
say
probably
motivated.
an easier way to make money. Looting is the primary motive behind war. And if you look at war in a long-term perspective, I think we have had war right from the beginning of recorded history, which is like roughly 5,000 years, let us say. Now, man is the only creature that makes war. None of the other animals make war. Okay, they have only small fights, temporary for some, either for food or for mates or whatever. But we have this as a huge, and we are still having it in the 21st century. At one stage, I was thinking that war is outdated, maybe it will die out. But again, it is now and then resurfacing in some parts of the world. So I don't think we have to look very deep into the psyche of these two people, because it was very similar to all the other people, all those who made war, whether they were Hindu kings or Muslim kings or Christians or anything anywhere in the world. I think the motive is the same: loot, get the treasures, the money, grab the women, take away the children, kill the men, whoever you don't like. I mean, you just kill them, convert some people into slaves. Whoever is capable of doing some good creative work, maybe you spare them. The soldiers you kill. So all this kind of thing was the motive, and they had the same motive. So from the motive point of view, and that was the only job they knew. The Hyder Ali became a soldier at a very young age. He was actually under his brother Shahbaz Khan, who was also a soldier. His father was a soldier who died fighting. So it is just the family tradition they carried on. So the psyche was to do the job that you know. But he was not satisfied when he had enough.
They didn't have
Once
any
he had,
other.
they didn't have any other occupation, any other things,
This is
time
what they
pass.
knew about. But what does your book suggest about the legacy of Tipu Sultan, perhaps in contemporary India? Does it come to that? Does it also talk about? I mean, I've read a book. I mean, I still to finish the book, so I would like to know from your part that does it come to the legacy of Tipu Sultan? How is it carried on in the contemporary India still? He's talked about, he's written
I
about.
don't think either of them have left behind any valid legacy,
Hmm.
because their occupation of Kerala was like a 25-year span, and it was 4 decades in Mysore. So once they have gone, the Wadiyars have staged a comeback in Mysore. The British reinstalled the Wadiyar dynasty, which before Hyder Ali came had been ruling there for hundreds of years. Even now, we have a nominal Wadiyar monarch in Mysore. Um, they created some social changes in Kerala. All of them were not very healthy changes. Some of the dynasties in the north were wiped out. The Zamarins were finished. The Kolatri Rajas of Kannur, they virtually disappeared. Many of them just escaped to Travancore in the south. And once they were gone, everything is back to the same situation. You know, the things that changed, for instance, there was a festival called the Mamangam. To call it a festival is a bit of an anachronism, because it was a very violent kind of a thing. See, a group of people from a neighboring kingdom will come. The aim is to kill the Zamarin. The Zamarin's guards will protect him. So it happens once in 12 years, and it was a very ugly spectacle. But people from all over the world would come to see this. It was supposed to be a very grand event. Okay, that ended with the arrival of Hyder Ali. Hyder Ali's 1766 arrival in Kannur was just 1 year or something before the next Mamangam was to be held. So naturally, it never happened, and till today, there is no Mamangam. So there are changes like this, but more than everything else, the peace and harmony of the place was destroyed. Because Kerala had Muslims right from the beginning. The Muslims did not come by war, they came in peace from Arabia direct. In fact, the first mosque which Kerala has, the chairman, Juma Masjid, it was built when the Prophet was alive. Okay, that early. So before Islam, the Arabs were coming. They used to marry, settle here. We call them Maplas even today. And many of the families still follow the matrilineal system, which is typical of the place Malabar and all. So everybody was living peacefully. There were no troubles. But once these people came, they upset that equilibrium by favoring some Muslims, forcibly converting some others. So then a little bit of bad blood came into the. But I'm happy to say that there is not so much of misunderstanding even today. Okay, we don't hear of anybody in Kerala named Tipu Sultan.
Yes.
The name is not. There are lots of Hyder Alis. Hyder has other meanings
Yeah.
also. A lot of people with the name Hyder Ali, but there is nobody with the name Tipu Sultan. And of course, many of the our warrior clans and other people, they often name the dog Tipu. Still,
I was going to say that. I thought I'd rather not mention. I was going
yeah,
to
it's not a nice thing to say, but see, I'll tell you what. See, I think, if you have to overcome trauma, if you
Hmm.
talk about all these things in whispers, it doesn't happen. It's better to come out with it, thrash it out, forget it, and move on.
So right. I mean, one thing which always impresses me about all the books that you write is also the cover. And since we are ending, we are towards the end of the conversation, I would definitely, and that's why I kind of intervened in your last question, because I want to talk about this cover. This is so fascinating, like your last book, cover. All the books are so well. I'm sure a lot of thought you give to the covers to make it so interesting and so appealing visually.
Really, this is the cover has a picture. If you
Hmm.
can, I don't know if people can see it clearly,
I can see it.
but
I
the
have the book
picture
in front
has
of
Tipu Sultan. Yeah, the picture has Tipu Sultan lying in a palanquin,
me.
and he's being taken away. It is a battle scene. It was the 1789 December when Tipu attacked the Travancore lines, which was a defense built by the Maharaja of Travancore to keep the invaders away. Invaders means anticipated Muslim invaders from Mysore. Okay, so Tipu Sultan came there, and one day he crossed the river, Periyar River, with some few thousand people, not his whole army, a few thousand people. He was advised against it, but he didn't listen to his advisors. He crossed the river, and obviously his entire army was slaughtered by the Nayars, and they were not. The river suddenly swelled in size, and it was difficult for them to go back. So whoever was left behind here was slaughtered, and Tipu was. I think he tried to jump into a ditch or something, and he injured his leg,
Mm.
and so he was carried away by his some of his soldiers, and many of the leaders lost their lives. So this picture it was painted by an unknown artist. It is there in the Kaudiyar Palace in Trivandrum,
Okay.
and yeah, the princess actually gave me this picture, and I insisted with the publisher that I want this picture on the cover. You'll
Mm.
also find there are no photos or paintings of Tipu Sultan's face or anything in the book.
Mm.
Most of the photos I've taken myself,
Mm.
and because you find all books having the same face and the same painting, and then
Mm.
they will have the picture of the British, the Cornwallis taking over the kids and all. So I didn't see any point in just reproducing all those pictures. So I have left them all out, and I have only the Gumbas where Tipu Sultan's body is kept.
Mm.
All those places where I went, his body is on one side, Hyder Ali is in the middle, and his mother Fakhrunisa is on one side, and Tipu Sultan's tomb still has that one cloth with the tiger stripes. Unfortunately, they put a lot of flowers, so cannot see the stripes very well. I wish they would not put flowers and only have that cloth. It looks like a tiger skin. So that's it, a very humble resting place.
Lovely, lovely narrative and a lovely book. So, last few words, just few minutes, 1, 2 minutes, if you could tell the readers, people who've not read the book, as to why they should read this book about
It's very
Tipu
important
Sultan.
for all of us to know the history of our lands. Unfortunately, what we learn in school is it's very different. It's whatever has been passed on by the British, we have reproduced. We have not written our own history. Today, there are attempts to rewrite history in an Indianized way, but then, often the pendulum swings to the other side and then adds a whole lot of fiction and everything, whatever history we would like it to be. So we try to glorify people like Tipu Sultan, which is not justified. Even Karnataka, you want heroes. There are many people, heroes and heroines. We have Kittur Rani Chennamma. We have Abbaka Rani, who was actually of Ullal, that is south, near Mangalore. She was the first person to strongly resist the Portuguese. She died fighting. She resisted them for a very long time. So there are lots of people. I mean, if you want to say India's first freedom fighter, it is her, because the Portuguese came first in 1498. Vasco da Gama came, and she was the person who was fighting all along. After that, other people came. 1510, they captured Goa, but they could not capture these places because of resistance of people like this. So there are a whole lot of